Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Special in-studio guest, Matt Taibbi. Matt, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Nice to see you.
Great to see you, and of course, reading all your stuff in the Rolling Stone. And first of all, just a quick question. I mean, you're writing all these stories about banks and what's going on Wall Street, but are you writing about finance, or are you writing about crime stories, basically?
It's funny, the lines have gotten so blurred. It's basically an organized crime story, and that's what I'm trying to do lately, is just convince readers that it's not really an economic story or a finance story. It's organized crime. There's no difference at all.
Yeah, I mean, the language that people use, the bankers, it sounds so highfalutin, and they use these credit default swaps and derivatives and collateralized debt obligations, but they could just as well be talking about, you know, whacking a guy behind the dumpster at Sparks.
Totally.
Essentially, it's the same thing. So you write, gangster banks keep winning public business. So they're in the business of doing the business of the public, in essence, and even though they're clearly violating the law, they're continuing to get these contracts. So tell us about it.
Yeah, and this is an example where it's exactly like the old mafia business. In the old days, we had municipal bid rigging, and it was a mafia group that would prey upon some local municipality, and the different mafia groups would divide up between each other which town they got to service their garbage, who got to service the laundry here, who got to do this and that, the cement, the construction. And that's exactly what we have with modern investment banking. All these investment banks have essentially divided up their territory. They are artificially lowering their bids for investment banking business. So a town goes out and it wants to issue a bond, and all of the banks, all of them, the usual suspects, Bank of America, Chase, they're all colluding to submit artificially low bids, and everybody's losing out, and it's exactly the same activity that we had with mafia groups. It's just that it happens to be bonds instead of garbage.
Well, or junk bonds, as they're called.
Right.
Garbage bonds, right?
Exactly.
So now another interesting aspect of this is that the mob has gone global, the Wall Street mob, and you see in Casino, Italy, there's a big story recently, and you've covered this extensively.
Yep.
So a couple of the highlights there. We can give the globalization of this.
Absolutely. That's one of the problems with prosecuting this kind of crime, is that it's so cross-territorial and cross-jurisdictional that there's no one law enforcement body that can really aggressively prosecute this kind of crime. And they also have a tendency to go regulatory shopping. Essentially, they seek out the areas where the regulations are the weakest, or the regulators who are the weakest, and that's where they'll base their operations so that the laws are less powerful. So it's very, very hard to nail them down for things like these swap manipulations, or the really big story, I think, that hit this year is the manipulation of LIBOR, which is this new burgeoning case that's coming out, and nobody really knows where they're going to prosecute that case.
Yeah, that story, and I don't know if you followed this one or not, but Bank of New York was caught in a multi-trillion-dollar custodian business for pensions and whatnot. They were stepping in front of all the trading, the foreign forex, and just scalping the pennies, billions and billions. And now they're saying, well, we're not sure we can prosecute that story.
That's like Office Space, that movie, right? Exactly. You do one penny at a time, but you do it a million times, right?
Well, now that's an interesting. Now, Rolling Stone, of course, is a pop culture magazine, and you go back to the Hunter S. Thompson days, the coverage of the politics of the '60s and the Nixon. And there you are, you're in the magazine, and the writing is different than you're going to find in the Wall Street Journal or Financial Times, because you bring in a real literary sense to it. It's great to read, even if you're not interested in the details of the stories. It's well written. Right. So as a writer, what are the challenges? It's kind of a bit of a tangent story, but I've always wanted to ask you this. As a writer, when you're talking in this space, because the material is so opaque, and the crimes are, when you talk about inflation, it's a crime that no one is really aware of happening. It's creeping.
Right. It's all around you.
How do you deal with that? I mean, as a writer, as a journalist, and go through your thought process on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's incredibly complicated and challenging, because and this is part of the reason that these guys get away with as much as they get away with, because the instant you try to explain some of these crimes, you can't do it in 1,000 words. You can't even do it in 3,000 words. It takes sometimes 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 words to explain how manipulation of the municipal bond market works, or what AIGFP was doing before the crash, all those things. So the first thing that I try to do always is I try to connect the activity to a real world consequence. So I'll find somebody who actually ended up losing money, and then I'll try to sort of connect that consequence to the crime. So for instance, in Jefferson County, Alabama, you start with somebody who got laid off, or somebody who had to pay a sewer rate that was 5 or 6 times what it should have been. And then you kind of work back from there, and you show how JP Morgan Chase's decision to sort of bribe its way into the lap of the local infrastructure resulted in that person having to pay all that money. So it's definitely a challenge, though. I mean, you yourself know the verbiage and all is a camouflage for all these crimes, and it's very, very difficult to sort through.
And the crisis that happened in 2008, the result of this was not any reform, but that the too big to fail got even more too big to fail. They got too bigger to fail.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it specifically, a piece that you've written, Bank of America, Too Crooked to Fail. Mm-hmm. So it's another fantastic, home run piece. Walk us through it a little bit, talk about it.
Yeah, what we just tried to do with this piece is kind of walk people through what the consequences of too big to fail are and what it really means. What people don't understand is when these companies get this big, and Bank of America, let's just back up, Bank of America should have gone out of business in 2008. They made 2 catastrophic decisions back during the crash. One was to acquire Countrywide, which is the giant subprime lender, and the other one was when they were essentially forced to acquire Merrill Lynch. So they had these 2 gigantic albatrosses around their neck, but instead of putting it out of business, conversely, it had the opposite effect. The company got so big, so artificially big because of these acquisitions, that now we couldn't let it go out of business. And now we're stuck with this company. And essentially, no matter what they do, no matter how many different kinds of ethical misdeeds they get involved with, we really don't have a choice anymore but to slap them on the wrist, kind of hope they get better, and continually bail them out. And this is what we tried to show in the piece. We sort of just listed all the different things that they're involved with, from municipal bond manipulations to rigging LIBOR to all the mortgage-backed securities rip-offs that these guys were involved with, ripping off the HAMP program, the Obama's mortgage program, ripping off people who have prepaid Bank of America cards to get their unemployment insurance benefits. And it's just one scam after another, but we have to turn the other cheek and just sort of let it happen.
What about mainstream media like CNBC, which is cable network dedicated to the ticker tape, basically, and is cheerleader for all this? So you've got like a Warren Buffett will come on, who's celebrated as America's sweetheart billionaire. He's got a big position at Bank of America, Wells Fargo Bank. He's directly involved in this fraud. Right. Wells Fargo Bank, the story with the drug laundering of the Mexican cartel. Right. Wachovia, who was acquired by Wells. Right. Hundreds of billions of dollars, directly connected to the money changing in Mexico. 22 tons of cocaine is basically what that covered. Wow. And so you have a Warren Buffett will go on CNBC. He's investing in these companies. Right. But plays his ukulele.
He's the great genius, the oracle. Right.
Again, from the pop culture side, the Rolling Stone side, you go from Jimi Hendrix playing Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock to Warren Buffett playing a ukulele at his annual meeting. Right. And people are celebrating that as a milestone in cultural, achievement. How did we get this far down the slide? What happened?
It's amazing. I remember. I grew up in a family of journalists, and I remember when I was a kid, reporters hated powerful people. It was just sort of a thing that was part of this business. We had a thing. We wanted to stick it to the man. If he was doing something wrong, everybody kind of they thought that it was their role to kind of take people down a peg when they got too big for their britches. But I don't know if you have the same experience, but in our business, something's changed. There's a completely opposite dynamic now in the media, which is that we worship powerful figures, we grovel and slobber at their feet. And it's been a terrible thing for America because there's nobody really asking these questions. And these guys are allowed to get away with a lot more because they have the presumption of correctness every time they come out with some new horrible scam. They're always given the benefit of the doubt by reporters, and it's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, and whistleblowers are being attacked. This Obama administration, much more than any other administration in history, is attacking whistleblowers. Right. And journalists are under attack all over the world. They're stopped at borders in our own country, in the U.S., and it's become, as you say, the dynamic has completely changed. Right. But we've got to. Let me just want to touch on this John Corzine scandal and the MF Global, because here is kind of a new chapter, because what we have discovered is that this Corzine scandal, he reached into customer accounts.
Right.
And he took money that segregated customer money. So it's not just billionaires playing with each other in ways that ultimately do cause problems.
Right.
This was a direct...
This is just stealing.
Stealing.
Yeah.
No way to round it. But Corzine is... nothing has been brought against him.
Right.
We'll talk about this.
This is an incredible thing. I was just out in California last week, and I'm doing some research about how we prosecute, say, welfare fraud in America, right? And there was a case that I heard about where a woman who was on welfare, she was on public benefits, and she used public daycare at a time when she was not allowed to use it, and they prosecuted her for fraud and put her in jail because she used the government service at a time when she wasn't supposed to, technically, right? So we actually put people that they make 40 or 50 felony cases a month in these California counties against these very, very small-time people. But John Corzine, he steals how many hundreds of millions of dollars it was? I mean, and again, it wasn't a sophisticated operation. It was just like you're talking about. It's like when a businessman gets desperate, he reaches in and embezzles his own company to pay off a drug habit or whatever. That's what this was. How is this guy still walking around? How is there no case? It's worse than the Trayvon Martin thing. Well, in a way. I mean, it shows you we live kind of in these two different worlds where there's one set of rules over here and one set of rules over here.
Well, to make the Trayvon Martin comparison, here's a guy who's getting murdered in the street openly, right. And Corzine is committing a fraud openly in the street, in the glare of the spotlight.
Right.
And people are wondering, well, is it really a crime? There's a similarity there. Like, someone just got murdered in the street, and people
right.
are wondering, I wonder if that's wrong.
Right.
And here you got Corzine. He just he just stole this money. They're like, is that wrong? Well, finally, Matt Taibbi, given the arc of the story here, do you think you're going to run out of stories on this topic soon?
It's funny. I was just talking about that with another journalist, and we both talk about how it's like a lifetime job security thing with this topic. There's just an endless, bottomless well of these scams, and if it appeals to your sense of humor, I mean, they're incredibly dark, and some of them are quite ingenious, actually. But they just never end. I mean, is that your experience? It just seems like they never run out of this
I don't think we're going to be leaving this post anytime soon.
Right, exactly.
Matt Taibbi, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.